Welcome back to Morning Express. It is now just 20 minutes after 7 and it's time for us to get into the newsroom. Now, agenda setting is the ability to tell the public what issues are important. It is the creation of public awareness and concern of prominent issues by media, issues that matter and are of concern to the masses. For a long time, the media filters and shapes reality. When the media concentrates on a few issues, the public perceives those issues to be more important than others. But what is the reality? Who should set the agenda, newsmakers or the media? Welcome to the newsroom and the panel that I have here this morning. We have to my immediate left, I have Julie Masiga, who's a journalist. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, welcome. And Oscar Obonyo, who's also a veteran journalist. Good morning, Oscar, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, let me start with you, Julie, because I know for starters you have a segment that you have on the paper, and whether you feel as a journalist, in your own personal capacity, you set agenda.
Yeah, I think I do, because I'm not constrained by having to report the news. I have the advantage of observing what's happening and trying to interpret it in a certain way. So I actually do try and look at issues that are perhaps not being talked about a lot or being talked about so much but not being broken down.
Right.
And to bring new fresh ideas and cause people to talk about things and see things in a different light. So I think I do try and do that every week in terms of giving a different side of things and inviting people to think a bit deeper about the things that happen every day.
All right.
So in that way, I think I do.
Oscar, do you think generally the Fourth Estate is doing that, setting agenda?
Well, I think the media does a lot in agenda setting. The only challenge comes in when you're talking about politics. Politics is a very volatile area, is an area of interest. But keenly, there are some areas like environment reporting, science reporting, sports,
Health,
and what have you. The media is able to set an agenda and say these are the issues that we need to discuss. But when it comes to politics, there are vested interests. As you know, politics is about resource allocation, and so that interests everybody. And there are many other players who want to push certain angles of a story, because at the end of the day, it helps them to either be in power, stay in power, or elbow some people out of power. So that is precisely where the challenge for journalists.
All right, we'll come to the other areas, but now that you've brought in politics, do you think we should be able to set the agenda even when it comes to politics? Because really politics is what drives us in life.
Ideally, we should be able to set the agenda when it comes to politics. Politics is defined variously. But the most agreeable definition of politics is politics is just about who gets what, when, and how. That is the agreeable definition of politics. Now, the really challenge comes in on the how aspect. How is it done? And that's now where we delve into politics. So the idea of people saying, politics is about ODM, NASA, Jubilee, and it's for a given class, it is wrong. That grandmother on the ground, and that shopkeeper on the ground, and the teacher, everybody, this is about us. And so we really need to get interested in politics. So for the journalist, I think it's important
to set the
agenda.
Julie, politically speaking, are we able to set the agenda, do you think?
Yeah, I think I would say that politics affects every aspect of life. It affects health, education, innovation, agribusiness, everything that we do is impacted by a political situation. So perhaps we should separate governance and leadership and then the politics of life in general, meaning that we should be involved every day. Every time that you make a statement about any social service, you're making a political statement. And we should have our eyes open all the time to see how, as he says, these resources are being shared out across the country, and kind of shift our attention from political leadership, because that we kind of have to play a bit of catch up, yeah? But I still think that in terms of for example, you're talking about manifestos. You're talking about Jubilee has been in power now for almost 1 quarter. Right. We should be asking, what have they done? Have they achieved? How much of the how many of their promises have they been able to start on, at least? Even for the county of Nairobi, our leadership, have they rolled out any plans that we can see, tangible things that we can see that they are working? Also, in terms of holding them to account in terms of corruption, how are they spending our money? I remember the Afya House scandal, the NYS scandal. In those particular situations, media did set the agenda. We actually went and found out that some things were going wrong and exposed it. So we were ahead of the curve in that sense. We need to do more of that.
All right.
We need to follow up on when people make statements. For example, NASA, the golden handshake scenario.
The famous Friday.
Yes, has created a lot of press statements, a lot of conferences, and we're listening to what they're saying and kind of reporting what they're saying. But perhaps we should try and go a bit further behind the scenes and see how's everybody just caught flat-footed? Where did this come from? Where is it going? Where is it likely to end? Those kind of analytical questions and answers. That now is agenda setting, to let people feel like they have an inkling of how this
of how things are running.
Yeah.
Oscar, where would you see the challenge as a journalist when it comes to agenda setting? Because let's take an example now of the Friday that she's mentioned, where Raila almost caught everybody by surprise, and Raila and Uhuru almost caught everybody by surprise. But if we follow that up, there was the summit that followed up, and we had all the NASA leaders basically give a statement. But how do we set the agenda in a case like that, whereas information is very limited?
That is the biggest challenge, actually, for journalists. As Julie puts it, it's important to have depth in the way that we carry out our stories. We really need to be on the ground. We need to nose around what is happening. Sometimes it's not just about reporting what has happened, but there are things that are happening. We can tell the movement of politicians. We can tell from the body language. We can tell from the literature that they're sending out. We can anticipate. A good political journalist should be one who is able to anticipate. And when scenarios like those unfold, like what we had on Friday, Raila meeting the president, I think the media should be able to make a quick reading. Is this good for the country? Is this the right way to go? But what happens? The media wants to report the event, and then they fall into the trap of the politicians. The politicians will be telling us this is betrayal. The politicians will be telling us we have been left out. Then at the end of the day, we start chasing those different strands. Those who have been left out, this is betrayal, and we forget the bigger picture. At the end of the day, I think a good journalist should be able to ask themselves, what is the agenda here? What do we need to project? Those others can just be snippets and the details of a story.
And now, from your observation,
yes,
what is the biggest story now, if we use that as an example of this particular scenario? Because at the end of the day, what we have now is who has been left out. How is this likely to impact 2022? Is this good for Ruto? Is that the bigger picture? What is the bigger picture of now a scenario like this?
I think we have been in this situation before. We were in this situation in 2007. Here we are again. That time, I think it was the National Accord, just after we had post-election violence, highly discredited poll. So for me, what comes first is the nation, the nationhood, the country. Even if you're talking about whether Ruto has been left out, whether Mudavadi has been left out and other politicians, but how does it contribute to the bigger picture? How is this good for us, for you and me, you in Kwale, you in Kaspul Kabondo, you in Kitui? How does this help us as a people of this country? It's interesting that we start looking into opportunities lost or gained of individuals. We start wondering, okay, Wetangula is going to lose a job, he can't get it. Do you even have one yourself? You really need to think about what is good for us. We think and care and worry so much about these politicians. For example, we have instances where NASA or Jubilee are disagreeing over who takes which seat in parliamentary committees, and it becomes a big issue. It boils down to a man getting that job. How does that concern the rest of us?
Concern the rest of us.
Yes.
Julie, why do you think we end up doing that? Because is it down to training? Is it down to possibly trying to play of what the reader wants to read or what the viewer wants to see?
Yeah, I think we're just used to it. We're used to personality politics. We're used to the pomp and the circumstance and the drama and all that comes with, like he's saying, does Mudavadi have a job or not? What's going to happen in 2022? That's our entertainment in a sense. And the media we claim that we are giving people what they want, but we need to break out of this cycle. If I was to set the agenda for the next four years, I would completely delink from what they're doing in political circles and focus on what they're giving us. Like Oscar is saying, think about your pocket. Think, for example, 70% of the stock exchange is owned by foreigners, which means only 30% of Kenyans get profit from Kenyan businesses. We're talking about things like the water crisis. We're talking about things like our health services, where people are forced to go to India to get quality health care. We're talking about things where we don't have enough. I think we have 1 or 2 PET scans in the entire country. Those are the really good scans that can really tell what's happening in your body. Talking about education, where 7 billion shillings has been wasted on books which had errors in them. The country is in debt, 85 billion shillings. And yet with this golden handshake, they're talking of creating yet another office to do God knows what, which means they're going to be spending more of our taxpayer money. I think now we should focus on what are they giving us. If they're wondering about also how they're getting jobs, where are our jobs? How are we going to survive? Cost of living is going up, fuel has gone up, electricity is going up, inflation is going up, food is expensive. These are the things that we need to now put at the forefront and make sure that we get ours, because we can see they're getting theirs. So as they wrangle with their 2022 manenos, I mean, that is of no consequence to us.
And how does that benefit us? That's a question we should be asking.
Exactly.
And I guess what you're saying, Oscar, speaks to depth of the story, because fine, there's this new arrangement between NASA and Jubilee or whatever, whichever affiliate parties, but how does that affect us, and how do we get that depth? Because again, there's a question of capacity. If right now, if there was an announcement or a press conference or one of those came up, then definitely you'll have reporters going that way. Before you finish that story, or before it's even finished being cut, maybe another one comes up. But how do we get to depth? Because depth requires capacity and requires time.
Yeah, precisely. The question of depth is one big challenge for journalists. I think media owners and they really need to do a lot and invest in personnel, the right personnel. In journalism, I think there's something that comes with the experience. Experience is very good. We need to look at what has happened previously. You can go as far back as in the 60s, if it's possible, and connect those dots and see whether the experiences in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s can relate to what is happening now, and signal the alerts where possible so that each time we get a clear reading. But we don't have much of that in the industry. We have, not out of their own making, but we have our journalists who are really challenged in that area, whose depth and focus cannot go far back 10 years, 15 years, who didn't understand.
You've been in the business for a while. Why do you think that happens? Because then we'd expect that those who've been there for a while and have the institutional memory are able to bring that depth so that the younger ones who are coming in now have either mentors or a source that they can look up to in terms of journalists.
Yeah, I think that is a structural challenge. There is need for that arrangement. There is need for experienced hands to be able to mentor the young journalists who are coming in.
Do you think that is happening?
That is not happening. One of the funny experiences I remember when I was in this newsroom here, 2004, Paul Gay, one of the the famous Kapenguria 6 passed on. And so we sent a team of reporters and KTN, and I think other media houses also did. So there was one old man in that group.
Out of the journalists?
An old man present at the function, whom very few journalists were able to recognize. I'm talking about Achieng' Oneko. And this was now the last standing of the Kapenguria. If you asked me, that is the guy we would have focused on. But we had footage here and pictures that did not include anything that Achieng' Oneko had said or done. No pictures. And the journalist there, one of them confessed to me, he was asking, who is this old man here? Why is he taking a prime seat here? Who is he? They don't know. So that also tells you that you don't necessarily have to tell the journalists when the story comes in, but you also need to brief and debrief the journalists.
A good brief.
You are going to this event. There is this one old man, blah, 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 look out for him, and so on and so forth. So those are also
Gaps that are
institutional
there.
gaps that we really
Julie,
need to...
as you're not a new journalist, but I'm sure you've been at it for a while, but do you feel like you've had mentorship and people you'd look up to locally that you could say, if you needed information, if you needed depth, if you needed institutional memory, if you needed to understand where we are today as you're doing your stories because of where we are coming from, are there people you could look up to?
Yeah, definitely. When I was starting out, I had the honor of being mentored by Lucy Oriang. And she was really a news hound. And she had that institutional memory. She had the skill, the education, the training to kind of show you practically what it is that you need to do for a story, who you need to look out for when you go. And I was really grateful for that because I learned a lot from her. Another one is Joseph Odindo, also here at the Standard when I was in the newsroom, where these are people who've been around for a while and also understand how journalism works. And they can give you hands-on experience, which is very different from what you can learn in school. But beyond that, we have the internet as well. The internet is a huge resource that people need to tap into much more. And it's also kind of a skill to know what to look for and how to verify your information. But it's just a little step further that you need to take to make sure that you can get all this history from there, as well as from actual mentors in the newsroom. But I agree with you 100% in terms of briefing people when they go out and telling them exactly what they need to get from a story, and taking the time to make sure that your story is well-rounded instead of just sending people out to cover events. So yeah, that might be lacking in our newsrooms, and we just need to take a little more time. And also I think we need to focus more on key stories instead of trying to cover everything. Just maybe you have all this information, but now break it down into what you think the public needs to know and why they need to know it, and focus on those few things, and that will make our resources stretch even further.
All right. Yeah. Oscar, your thoughts on the learning institutions that we have now, because you'll find many journalists as they're coming out, their idea of journalism is very different from what it was before. And it is more, can I be seen? Can I be heard? It's more to do with the looks and the likes. You know, we're in a generation of likes, with social media and all that.
Followers.
And followers. And that's probably what many come out with the mentality of, whereas that is not really the essence of journalism.
Yeah. There is this celebrity thing that everybody wants. And what they look for in journalism, they want to be on set, they want to see their byline. But then, when you interrogate these individuals, they lack the self-drive. They lack the stamina. I keep telling, I have young people, family, friends, wherever, and where I come from, who know you are a journalist, who will be asking, I want to be a journalist. What do? They just slap an envelope, CV, certificate, blah, 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 School of Journalism, and that's all. But it's beyond that. Do you have the drive? Are you doing something before you even ask for that job? There are people who have gotten into this industry just out of self-drive. You demonstrate that you can do something before your editor says, okay, can we now have a look at what you have? Not the other way around, that I have the cert, can I get a job? Yeah. So something really needs to be done towards that. I think journalism is a bit different. It's more than the papers. It's about the drive. But our learning institutions, what do? You join, you want to become a journalist, they give you the tuition and they give you the papers, and that is it.
And leave you to go ahead.
Yes.
Julie, do you think that we have institutions that are empowering journalists properly? Because what you learn in a classroom and what happens out here are sometimes quite different.
Yeah, very, very different. I think for anything that you study, what you learn in class is different from the actual thing you're going to, the practice, yeah. So I agree that you have to have the drive. When you're learning something, you've gone to school for something, you have to have the passion for it. You have to think of it like a calling of sorts, especially if you're a journalist, especially in the times we're living in. You can see what's happening even in the US with Donald Trump. If those journalists were just doing their job by rote, they would not have been able to fact check him as much as they have and always put his feet to the fire because they want to do something for the public, they want to do something for their country and for their society and communities. I think that's what is lacking with us. We can poke holes in our education system and say that we're churning on graduates who are not qualified, perhaps even in the theoretical sense. But it comes from inside. I think perhaps in schools they should have maybe mentorship programs, or as community, what do they call it, CSR, companies should go out and also try and mentor and try and instill in the Kenyan youth our work ethic in terms of you believe in what you do and you want to do it well. That might be what is lacking. And also, of course, the economy is bad. People are looking for jobs. And you might end up doing something you didn't plan to do because you have to get a paycheck. There are very many different factors in the African setting and the Kenyan setting. But I would say bottom line is that find something that you believe in and have it in yourself to want to help other people.
To want to help.
So that's what will now push you forward.
All right.
Actually,
And
towards that, if I may chip in, one lady that we all respect in this industry, Catherine Kasavuli, I think noticed that gap. She came up with an arrangement and some kind of college to train people immediately after college to prepare you for
the real world.
For the real world, for the studio, for the set, and that kind of thing. I don't know how far she has gone, but I think there is this need for that bridging.
A bridging measure.
That bridging.
All right, and just a quick reminder that you're welcome to participate in the conversation. Do you feel like media sets agenda? And if not, why? Do you have advice that maybe you'd like to give to the media, or your comments and are welcome? You can do that via social media, but also the phone lines are now open and they are displayed on your screen, so you can give us a call. Now, another area that maybe we could look at, Julie, is the ability to source for information, because other than the social media has completely changed the terrain as it was before.
Yeah.
Previously, you'd buy a newspaper to find out what happened yesterday, who said what, but that has completely changed. On Twitter, I mean, look at Rex Tillerson. He probably got his firing letter via Twitter when everybody else is seeing.
Yeah.
So as news is happening, everybody else is getting that news. The breaking news is no longer breaking by the time we get to the newsroom.
Right.
How do we leverage, or what relevance are we of today, given that news is no longer now as it was before? We are not a source of information per se.
Right.
Maybe depth, but what relevance do we have?
Yeah, that's a discussion people have been having, I think, for years now, because the industry is shrinking by virtue of the fact that everybody is a content creator on Twitter. If I have my phone and I'm somewhere near where something is happening, I take a picture, I put it on social, people know about it immediately. By the time KTN gets there, NTV, cameras, newspaper reporters, it's old news, everybody knows. And by the time the paper comes out the next day, the news stations and the radio stations have already reported it. So I think what we need to move to, like we've been saying for a long time, is day two journalism. Something has happened. So what? How does it impact us? What is going to happen? What is likely to happen tomorrow? We have to shift our focus from reporting news to analyzing news. And like we're trying to say today, setting the agenda. Because we can't play catch up with social media. It's impossible, because there are millions of Kenyans out there with phones as compared to thousands in the news industry. So I think that's one of our functions is to analyze, break down, set the agenda. Another one is to confirm, because lots of news gets thrown around on social media and people are, it's rumors.
There's a lot of fake news as well.
Lots of fake news. Yeah, so that's one strength that we will continue to have, I think, until the end of time, is the ability to confirm, is this true or not? And then that comes back down to our sources. Our reporters, do they have sources in government, in the private sector? Are they able to get the facts right? And then our relevance perhaps will be maintained in that way. But otherwise, I think it's inevitable at some point that newspapers might become almost irrelevant.
In
terms of...
And Oscar, do you see a time where newspapers would be relevant? Or maybe we'll just need to change their name from newspapers to context papers.
Or papers.
Or just papers.
Actually, it's happening already in the West. Quite a number of papers are folded. But what we really need, as Julie says, is to... Because if news is already out there, then you must come up with something that adds value. So that means that you must go analytical, tell us the story behind the story, what prompted the action, and how does it impact on us. So that is the biggest challenge. You wake up in the morning and you look at newspaper, you go to the newspaper stand, and what you're seeing is what you saw yesterday. You see these two gentlemen and that golden handshake. You saw it on TV, it's in the Star, it is in the Nation, it's in social media.
Right.
So that is the challenge that our editors have. So, and that's where now you really need to have your nose on the ground, find out what prompted that decision, how did it get there, who are the actors behind it, and how does it impact on you and on the politicians.
Well, they say change is inevitable, and what we can do is leverage on social media. Rather than have it shrink the newsrooms to oblivion, we can still leverage on social media to advantage. Are we doing enough of that?
Well, I think we are, but I think instead of leveraging on it, we have kind of joined the fray. Because like news will break, for example, and then all the news handles and newspaper handles will be breaking the same news. So we're kind of doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. The question is, how do we use that space to do something different? I'm not clear what that something different would be because of the nature of the it's so quick, you know, things happen and you just have to keep it moving.
Playing catch up.
Yeah, so that's a question we need to ask. Perhaps somebody who's an expert in digital media can tell us how legacy media can leverage off social media, apart from, of course, using it as a news source. Because I know most of the time, if something happens, the first place many reporters will go is Twitter,
right,
and see what people are saying, because you're likely to get very close to the truth on Twitter. Beyond that, Mike, that's a hard question.
It's a hard question. It's something that needs to be worked on as we carry on. But Oscar, the other thing, when we're talking about agenda setting, is we also have media houses and journalists, especially when it comes to politics, who are partisan. So how do we set agenda when stories sometimes are written to favor the side that maybe the journalist or the editor or the media house is partisan to? Could that be an area where we're failing?
Yeah, that one is it's a really difficult one. The idea of sometimes it's real, sometimes it's imagined. In this country, people are very keen on the byline, talking about print media. And sometimes readers will conclude the drift of the story just depending on the byline. Oscar Obonyo is writing about so-and-so. This is the way it's likely to go.
This way.
Michael Gitonga, this is the way it's likely to go. And sometimes the editors must do something to ensure that there is believability in the stories that we do. I personally would wish to encourage journalists and editors to stop getting embedded to political parties. There are some writers, some journalists that clearly their business is to report on NASA events. If anything about NASA, it is them. If it's about Jubilee, it is them.
Although I'll come back to you, but there would be nothing wrong with specializing, I guess. It's only that now when it's partisan or when it's skewed to give a certain story or a certain narrative without necessarily sticking to the truth. But I'll come to that. Let me take a call from Ezekiel calling from Ukunda. Good morning, Ezekiel, to your comment or your question.
Yes, good morning, Tonga.
Morning.
I wanted to contribute on the agenda setting by the media.
Go right. Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, I am really disappointed by the action of the agenda setting. Then after all Kenyatta and Raila Odinga have put their self-interest hard, forge ahead and unite the country. The next day I went to the newspaper stand, also on the NT. Their headline is that Raila will not be attending the NASA summit. Then after 1 hour, I see Raila attending. So the media must also come up and now set the agenda straight. They must have an intention of also uniting the country and putting the agenda of Kenyans first. Like unemployment issue. The media is not raising this. Unity issue now that the country is united. The media is not actually going into this. What we see in the media is about 2022 politics. Mm-hmm. And I think now it's time now the media to join hands. Uniting this country, putting our agenda right, like the employment issue, security issue, country issue. I am looking forward where each and every week the media will be telling us what is happening in County A, County B, and County C. I think from that the country will be moving in the right direction.
Thank you very much.
Every time it's about politics of unity, the stronger we are getting it from. I think the media must now stand it up, and every Kenyan will support the media. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Ezekiel. And but coming back to what we had mentioned earlier, that sometimes we are filled with just politics and what's happening, playing catch up. This happened, there's this press conference being issued by this political party, whereas unemployment is still an issue. We have issues with rising cost of living. We have issues with corruption. And I see we're running out of time. Julie, how do we wrap this up and how do we ensure that we are keeping our government in check as we should?
I think, like the caller said, we switch our gaze and our perception from political leadership and 2022 politics and look at what are they doing between now and then. Even break it down to the counties, from the national level to the county governments. How much money do they have? How are they spending it? How have they allocated it? Keep them in check according to what they say they are going to do, their manifestos, their plans, their budgets. Every single day, bring up a new issue. Bring up health, bring up education, bring up innovation, bring up agriculture, bring up unemployment, as you're saying. Go behind the headlines and break things down and show people the figures, show people how far they have gone according to how far they said they were going to go, and just keep their feet to the fire. Let's distance ourselves and disconnect ourselves from the drama, the political theater, because as we know, that gets us absolutely nowhere. We just follow them till the end of the story, and then they begin a new story and we start a new chapter. If I had a magic wand, that's the kind of thing I would do. I'd switch the focus from the leadership and the politics of life, because like I said, politics affects every single aspect of our lives. And if Kenyans could only think with their pockets, because that's where we hurt the most, I think we would get much further in holding these people to account, because quite honestly, they waste our money. We watch them wasting it. And when the next election cycle comes, we vote in the same people.
Absolutely. Oscar, your wrapping thoughts on how we set the agenda and what we need to do.
I want to pick up from what Ezekiel said. He said he read the papers. The papers said that Raila would not attend the NASA summit.
Right.
But then the following day, he was there. This is the problem we have with politics. Is also a science, but it becomes difficult when you're dealing with human beings. Perhaps the guy did not intend to be there. Perhaps that's the feelers that he sent out. But then you read the paper, he makes an assessment from what is happening, and he changes his mind, and he attends. Then what is the interpretation out there that the media is misleading? So as Julie says, it's not safe enough to get deep into it because the situations keep changing. But even as we try to set the agenda for the media, I think the editors the editor's hands are also tied. There is the aspect of cells. What is happening, deforestation in Kitui is a big story. We can go big on that.
And it ties
but
into
then-
even matters of environment.
Yes, matters of environment.
Global warming, the
Yes.
fact that we have floods, flash floods, and
Yes.
rains are no
Yes.
longer predictable. So it's a huge.
It's a huge story. But I'm just wondering, if you splash that story, I don't know what the returns would be in terms of sales.
Yes, and that's true.
And those are the other considerations,
balance,
again,
yes.
that
I think
make us
maybe
go
just
there.
tie everything back to how is it going to affect you, your family, and how your ability to take care of your family.
Yeah.
If logging in Kitui is going to cause a situation where we can't get enough rain, and then we go into a drought scenario, then we're importing maize from Mexico or from Uganda or from wherever, this in the end comes right back to the consumer.
But honestly speaking, Julie, if you saw the headline, logging will affect you 10 years down the road, no food supply, and you saw Raila will not attend the summit meeting, which one would you buy? 10 years down the road
No,
or
no,
tomorrow?
but logging affects us actually. You know, we had a drought last year, Mike. We actually did have a serious drought, which actually caused water shortages early this year and the end of last year. These things are actually happening now. We have to find a way to make these relevant to people. Maybe sexify the headline and put Raila somewhere. Raila says logging in Kitui is going to...
Then you'll be accused of misleading. But anyway, I get your point. But we'll have to wind up because of time. Thank you very much, Julie Masiga and Oscar Obonyo, for joining us this morning on the newsroom. And we're going to take a short break right here on Morning Express. But today is Wednesday, so we've got your health. Dr. Mercy Korir has got, health news. But also, if you had a patient in hospital and there was malpractice, or you felt that a doctor did not treat you right, what recourse do you have? What do you do? What happens? All of us, I'm sure, will remember very, very clearly what happened in Kenyatta Hospital not too long ago. But in a case like that, and in other cases possibly where some have felt that the medical practitioners have not treated you right, what do you do? That's all coming up right here on Your Health. So do stay with us right here on Morning Express.